This is Senator Mazie Hirono, the U.S. Senator from Hawaii, the Democrat from Hawaii. Hirono, Hirono.senate.gov is the website, and the Twitter handle is Mazie, M-A-Z-I-E, Hirono. And Senator Hirono, welcome to the program. It's so nice to have you with us. I spent the weekend with your book, Heart of Fire, An Immigrant Daughter's Story, and it is extraordinary. You have written a masterpiece.
Oh, my gosh, Tom, that is high praise coming from you. Thank you so much. Good to be with you.
Thank you. It is a pleasure and an honor to have you with us. I had no idea about your background. We could talk so long about so many things, but first of all, just as an immigrant, and the story of your brother and your mother and the troubles with of your father and everything, all of this stuff. I mean, and as an Asian immigrant, for that matter, what are your thoughts right now on the crisis that seems to be befalling the Asian community in the United States in terms of hate crimes that seem to be provoked by Donald Trump's promoting racist stereotypes and language around the coronavirus?
Well, we've all seen the rise in hate crimes, totally unprovoked hate crimes against Asian Americans. And most recently, I just saw a clip of a person in New York having his head stomped on. This is terrible. So racism, the racism is never far below the surface in our country, and Asian American Pacific Islanders are the perpetual outsiders and the other perpetual foreigners. So every once in a while, we would have things like the Chinese Exclusion Act, the internment of 120,000 Japanese Americans during World War II, the Muslim ban. It comes up. And yes, we have the racism against blacks that we have never dealt with and faced up to in our country. So racism is never far below the surface. But with regard to the AAPI community, we have seen a huge increase in unprovoked attacks. And I would say that let's connect the dots. When you have a Trump saying that this is a China virus, his administration calling it the Kung Flu, you've created an environment, an atmosphere where the animus against the other comes forward in horrendous ways.
Yeah. Well, toward the end of your book, you mentioned that when Trump lost his Twitter handle, you said, this is from memory, so you said something like Gollum has lost his precious on Twitter.
Yes.
Do you think that the loss of Donald Trump's media platform, although I know that Mark Zuckerberg is debating giving it back to him on Facebook, but do you think that has been a good thing? Or do you think that the genie's out of the bottle and Trump is irrelevant now? There's the racist movement that was always kind of embarrassed and underground in America is now out and loud and proud.
The social media is huge, and I am grateful that Trump doesn't have his tweet anymore. And yes, a lot of Lord of the Rings people came out and retweeted my tweet. So
yes, I can see why.
But there's so much stuff. There's so much misinformation and disinformation in on these platforms that in some ways, the genie is out of the bottle. On the other hand, there are efforts to try and hold these platforms, the social media platforms, more accountable for the content of what they're allowing to spew forth.
Yeah, it seems at the very least requiring them to publish the details of their algorithms, both the code and in English language. Exactly. Here's how we take somebody from watching a Trump video to watching a Holocaust denying video. This is why we promote them from one to the other. That kind of thing might be a useful first step, but that's just me. You have an entire chapter on your book about Betty Friedan and me. Although reading the chapter, there wasn't. I kept looking for a Betty Friedan story. Maybe I missed it. I'm not sure. But you also, in the New York Times wanted a picture of you, and you were there with the feminine mystique. Tell us about feminism, Betty Friedan, the feminine. What impact did this have on your life, and how do you bring this into the work that you're doing as a United States Senator?
Betty Friedan's Feminine Mystique, which I read in college, very much changed the way I began to look at what I was going to do with my life, because while I was raised by this really courageous single mother with no father in sight, I still had taken on the expectations of the dominant culture, which was that we get married, we have children. And so I read this book and I thought, why the heck am I even thinking like that when that's not been my experience at all? And why should I wait around for some guy to take care of me? So I began to start thinking about my own path. But I can honestly say that aside from my mother, who single-handedly changed my life by bringing me to this country, if anyone were to ask me, what is the one book that changed your thinking, I'd say that book really changed.
It truly was a pivot point in certainly American history in my lifetime, and you and I are about the same age. You have a chapter called Across the Aisle, and in this chapter you talk about, for example, working with Jeff Sessions, and which I thought was absolutely fascinating. And you talk about, I was reminded that even though my Republican colleagues and I could sometimes meet on the same page, we remained far apart on many issues. And you talk about times when you actually were successful in bipartisan efforts, and times when you were unsuccessful. And you mentioned the Gang of Eight's efforts to fix this system and everything. Are you reconsidering, or what are your thoughts on that right now? Now that Mitch McConnell and the Republican Party have gone so far as to forbid President Obama from having Merrick Garland for over a year, to just say no to any kind of legislation, even when it has 70, 80, 90% popularity among the American people, but they'll force through a giant tax cut that has 21% popularity. Is bipartisanship even a thing anymore, at least in Congress? I realize, lots of Republicans support things like Joe Biden's infrastructure plan, but your thoughts on
that? The Senate is a very divided place, and one of the major reasons it's divided is Mitch McConnell. If Mitch said tomorrow, we're going to reach out, we're going to work cooperatively with the Democrats, it would happen. There would still be the holdouts, the usual suspects. And but he won't do that because he wants to retake the Senate in 2 years. And so all of the things that we need to do, such as the huge infrastructure bill that will create jobs, lasting benefits, the policing reform bill, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, all of the other things that we need to be enacted will not happen, I don't think, without a filibuster reform.
Yeah,
so
big step.
That is something that we're going to need to face up to if we really want to do the kinds of things that the people want and need.
Yeah. Absolutely. We just have 2.5 minutes until we're going to hit a hard break here. You talk about your experience twice now having to go through surgery as a result of stage 4 kidney cancer. And in particular in your One Nation Under Siege chapter, you talked about I'd been a child whose uninsured family could not afford routine, let alone crisis health care. And now you are an American with a pre-existing condition. That story of having that rib removed, just, whoa, that seemed really, really rough. But where are you at in your thinking right now on how we deal with health care in the United States, having been not just part of this process for so many years as a politician, but also, as a person who has seen the best and worst of American healthcare and arguably the best and worst of what can happen to a human being medically?
I'm going to continue to fight like heck for child care as a right, not a privilege. And so
healthcare?
Thankfully, we're not going to see healthcare as a right, not a privilege. So at least we're not going to see further efforts on the Senate side as long as the Democrats are in control of efforts to repeal the Affordable Care Act, although the case is before the Supreme Court. So it remains to be seen what they're going to do with healthcare, but everything matters when you have the Democrats in charge of the agenda in the Senate, and you're not going to see a $1.5 trillion totally necessary corporations in our country. In fact, quite the contrary. We should be making sure that everybody, corporations especially, pay their fair share of taxes, which they are not. So it makes a difference, right? And I will continue to fight for health care because there are millions of people with pre-existing conditions. This is a thing. I'm so glad you read my book, but I hope that people will find different areas of where they can relate. There's millions with cancer in our country. There are millions of people who haven't been able to see their loved ones during the pandemic. And, of course, for women to be underestimated and told, not your turn, and, we don't want to hear from you, that is something that a lot of us have gone through, not to mention the sort of the sexual harassment that a lot of us have gone through.
Yeah. It's an absolutely amazing book. I could not put it down. Heart of Fire, An Immigrant Daughter's Story by Senator Mazie Hirono of Hawaii. Senator Hirono, thank you so much for writing this book, and thank you for dropping by and sharing it with us.
Thank you so much, everyone. And Tom, stay safe, everyone.